Welcome back to the Brent and Austen Show, streaming on the Action Sports Jax 24/7 network.
Hey, shout out to the folks at Best Bet, Sherry over there on the left, and they've had all the games that they have down at Best Bet St. Augustine right there on that one table. So there's like an explanation and how you play them, all the table games that we talk about when we go down to Best Bet St. Augustine. We'll be at Best Bet Jacksonville coming up on Friday, a big women's event this weekend. So on Monument Road, come on out, hang out with us, get some sushi, get some fries. As I always tell you, it's really good there. Lunch as well. So hang out with us from 10 to 1 on Friday. Thanks to Best Bet for always being a big supporter of our Action Sports Jax, Dream 18 over the years, and Jamie Shelton and everybody else, Jesse Hollander and the like at Best Bet. So we appreciate them. We had a good day yesterday. And how about this? We got a sun streak here in Jacksonville. Steph and I woke up a little early, went for a walk, Austin, and the sun was shining. So I don't know if it was the Dream 18 or whatever, but we at least flipped the script when it comes to the rain and the sun, and maybe the Jags just don't play well when it rains for 2 weeks. The sun will bring brighter days here in Jacksonville.
No, listen, I'm glad to hear that you're probably getting some, sunshine in your life, because I think Mr. Sunshine and Rainbows is definitely gone thanks to the Jacksonville Jaguars after 2 weeks. So at least we can get some physical sun in the sky, because the metaphorical sun from Brent Martineau might be long gone, which you hate to see it.
Yeah, that's hard to do, by the way. It's really hard to do.
Too? I know it.
I know it. It's hard.
But I don't blame you. Hey, I don't blame you, Brent.
I don't know. This is like, the more I think about, I don't know what people were saying. I guess like their over-under was 8.5 and stuff. And I like what we said, like, what's their floor, right? Were we that bamboozled by this? And now all of a sudden you're like, oof, how many are they going to win? I mean, look, even some of the way teams are playing, right? Minnesota is 2-0. Like, people thought Minnesota was going to be the worst team in the league. Now, here's what I'm clinging to right now in the moment. That the NFL is freaking goofy, like really goofy, and we know it. Baltimore's 0-2, Minnesota's 2-0. That enough said. New Orleans, holy cats, look what they're doing, right? So, I mean, it's a goofy league. So much so that it's the kind of league that you go win the next 2 games because nobody thought you'd win one of them. I mean, it's that kind of league. So I guess I'm clinging to that. And the other thing I was thinking about a little bit today, Austin, is some of the teams that you thought you'd be competing with to be some of the elite teams in the AFC are really doing nothing. Your whole division is 0-2, which is the first time since 2007, and the Patriots did this, that one team is 2-0 and the rest of the division is 0-2. Do you believe that? First time since 2007, since the realignment days, that's happened. That seems crazy that it can be the first time that one team in a division is 2-0 and the rest are 0-2.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely insane, just because, and I get it, like, this has been a crazy NFL year so far, but there's so much parity where you think like one team would just kind of fall into a win, kind of like the Titans were supposed to do, and then Will Levis said, go ahead and check this out. It is pretty wild.
Well, and here's the other thing. So I'm trying to come up with the sunshine and rainbows part of this. Those teams that I mentioned, like Baltimore and Cincinnati, those are teams that were supposed to be elite. So you really haven't lost ground to them. If the and even Miami now, right, because of the Tua situation, the Jets actually don't look really like good right now. So what I'm saying is the teams that you thought would be there, if we're right, that eventually they get there and they're part of it, you haven't lost a lot of ground. And then I'll throw one more thing in. With the AFC South, the last 2 years, if you've had a 2-game lead even late in the season in the AFC South, you've lost. So forget about 2 games, 2 weeks in. Yeah. So it hasn't necessarily been a fond spot to be in, leading the AFC South. So I don't know. I'm trying here. It can flip. If the Jags go to Buffalo and win, next Tuesday we'll all of a sudden be like finding ways that, okay, they fixed it. You know, it's just the way it works, and we know it. But now they could easily be 0-3, and now they can easily be 0-4. And that's what I think there was a part of us that knew they could be 1-3 if things didn't start well. And so but none of us thought 0-4. Like, okay, you're going to get one of them. You're good enough to get one of them. And quite frankly, they've been so bad, but still probably good enough to steal both of them if one play goes their way. That's how crazy it is. Like I feel like they stink right now. I feel like they're a shell of what I thought they would be. And they were 2 plays essentially from being 2-0.
Yeah, I mean, that's the frustrating part. I think we all agreed, Brent, like, you have to get out of here 2-2 during those first 4. Because, yes, they're quality teams and everything, but it's the NFL. There's parity. We think you're a great team. 2-2 should be the status quo. And I remember even saying, like, hey, if they go 3-1, I mean, now we're humming. Now we're back. Now, well, yeah, that's not even going to come close to fruition here. So here's the thing, because – and I guess this is why I'm a little worried, Brent, because if history seems to be the indicator, and the Jaguars, I'm not sure what the point spread is and everything for Monday night, but I assume it's going to be pretty big. History would show that this game is going to be super close, and the Jaguars could win it, because this is what the Jaguars do. Like, when you give up all hope and everything, they come out and surprise you. But the a part of me wants to say, like, okay, but it's prime time, Buffalo. What, like, if this is a blowout, Brent, and once again, we're going to have a couple more days to kind of break this game down and how we think it's going to go and everything. But if Buffalo comes in, who's obviously a very good team, but if Buffalo goes out there and curb stomps the Jaguars, then I don't know what we're talking about anymore, honestly. I mean, I know we're talking about 0-3. I know we're talking about disappointment, but like, that's kind of like my last flicker of hope here. Is like, okay, well, if it's more of the old, at least more of the old is going to show us, like, they're going to go out there and be competitive. They're going to go out there and play pissed off because the first 2 games didn't go well. If they go out there and lay another egg, then I'm not sure what the season's going to look like.
Well, it will then echo kind of the sentiments that you just had before we hit the break, and we have a lot of topics to get to here, but this is what you were talking about. You're worried, like, I'm so damn worried about them and bothered by the fact they can't line up, even to the point where Andy Cray has joined us, and hey, Andy, what's up? The real problem, the Jags, that everyone knew the issues, Bulky didn't really address them, and he's talking about the offensive line. And again, I would say right now what bothers me even at the moment, and for the last couple of days more than the offensive line, is the fact that they can't line up in year 3 of the offense. Like, you can be a crappy offensive line and can't be able to block anybody, and there's many evidence that they can't, by the way. There's a lot of evidence in that favor, but I mean, you should still be able to line up, and most of the offensive linemen are lining up. Like, this isn't their problem. We're not even talking about false starts or anything. We're talking about timeouts and shifts and things like that where the other guys on the field can't line up. So this isn't an offensive line problem. So that's my issue right now, where it's got me still hot on a Tuesday morning, because that doesn't make sense to me as a professional player. It makes sense to me in high school. But it doesn't make sense to me as a professional player why you can't operate in year 3 of a system with a lot of the same guys. For Austen now, he looks at the Trevor news conference, and there's alarm bells that go off about what else is happening inside this building. And Austen, I want you to echo that a little bit more. I probably don't have the exact sound that you're referencing, but it's a combination of sound coming out of that post game on Sunday with Trevor. Here's a little bit of it about accountability that Trevor's talking about.
Everybody's got to take accountability, look in the mirror, and fix it. I got to play better. I'm the leader of this offense. It's on me. The wideouts got to play better. The lines got to play better. Running backs got to play better. We've got to coach better. I mean, it's everybody, honestly. But we're standing around. We got to take charge. We're standing around waiting on somebody to make a play. Defense is playing their ass off the last 2 weeks. If a team doesn't score more than 20 points on us, we should win every week.
That play right there was all over social media. That play right there that he bails out and he had a clean pocket, which he did. He had a clean pocket, probably could hit Brian Thomas Jr. or Gabe Davis. But again, I don't want to use like the see and go stuff, but that's what happens when your offensive line doesn't block earlier in the game, and your clock goes faster. Like, should we blame Trevor for that? Sure, he's got to stay in the pocket, but I can also see why he bails. I mean, if you watch the rest of that game, you can see why he bails. I mean, that's just human nature. I mean, these guys are humans; they're not robots. So, you'd like to see him not bail there. I get it, but I also kind of get why he bailed, because he probably felt it was coming. Go ahead, Austen. Anyway, reaction to the accountability stuff.
So that was the exact. Well, I mean, there's a lot of audio that we could have used, but that right there is Exhibit A, and some great audio that I want to point to a little bit, because there's almost and listen, maybe I've been out of the game so long, Brent, where it's changed in a locker room, but I have a hard time believing that's the case. There's kind of an unwritten rule during a post-game press conference, whether you're at the mic and the podium or whether you're at your locker and then the people come to you, you never really bring up coaching. Like, I remember there was a couple of games, and like this was like back in 2010, 2011, where our defense was good, but there's a couple games, like I remember like the Houston game. Remember that Houston game we talked about? I think that was 2011 or 12, whatever, where like Matt Schaub threw for 500 yards.
Yeah.
Right. And obviously their defense got embarrassed. And, a lot of that was because we thought that the game plan on defense was super basic, and they read it and we couldn't counter it because we didn't have like a big install. And I remember being super frustrated about how, just the plays that we had, they weren't working, and we almost felt helpless out there at some point. And I remember, sitting in the back of the plane with a bunch of defensive linemen, a bunch of linebackers. We're just like, man, this sucks. We felt like we weren't set up to succeed in that game. But I remember, there was a couple of mics that came to my locker. The last thing we were going to do is say, well, it was the play calling. It was the coaches, and maybe it was some of the truth, Brent, but you never really saw a coach, I feel like. And I think that's how a lot of guys, at least when I played in that locker room, felt like you don't bring up coaches. You can say, okay, we got to do better here. Maybe your teammates got to do better here. But it's almost like, yeah, it's a team, but it's the players and it's the coaches, and you don't really cross that line. And granted, Trevor brought up himself. Trevor brought up his teammates. Trevor, brought up, getting the call, whatever the case may be. But the last thing he says, he had a chance to put a period, end sentence, stop. Nope. He brings up the coaches as well, and they have to coach better. And I felt like that spoke volumes. And I think that speaks volumes now of where they are as a team and where this offense is in the locker room. And once again, I go back to the chain of command. I go back to the play calling. I think this all falls under that umbrella. And I think we're starting to see it fester now and come to the surface because, the offense isn't looking so good.
Yeah, I think it's a good catch. And to be honest with you, in real time when he said it, I was in the room. I don't usually go to the room. I usually go to the locker room. But I thought after this game, I wanted to go to Doug and Trevor before we went out to the post-game show, or I joined for the post-game show. And it caught my ears. Now, coming out of it, there was so much. And he said a lot in that news conference, by the way. I mean, the other one that caught my attention really is listen, if you don't want to do it, go find another job. Yeah. He said that about his teammates, which I think is looked at kind of fondly. That's what we were talking about yesterday a lot with Josh and Scobie and you and Coach even. So, but this one is interesting, and I like the context you brought up. You've been there. You're right. You don't get a lot of that, especially from the quarterback. But we also haven't had a quarterback like this. We haven't had a quarterback that it's his team. It's his franchise. Doug even said it yesterday when asked about it. He's like, hey, I like the fire and all that stuff. He's like, listen, he's the franchise. Like Doug said, he's the franchise, right? So when you have that onus on you, well, then you got to take some ownership. And maybe that was Trevor taking ownership. Maybe it was a slip. But this does, Austin, this actually goes right back to the play calling. See, I don't know what your interpretation of that. Maybe you just said it's kind of like the systemic thing, right? And the top down, the trickle down. But to me, what he might be referencing is we know he's been frustrated at times. His body language last year on getting a playoff, his body language in that game Sunday about getting a playoff, some frustrating with the guys. We can go last year to Calvin Ridley. But the one thing he hasn't really turned to do, but you kind of wonder, is if he turns to the sideline and he's like, get the bleeping play call in. Hurry it up. Let's go. And I'm telling you, this has been so hard for me to eloquently describe because I'm not on the headset. I don't know what that's like. And so I'm not telling you this is what's happening, but my interpretation of what has happened the last year with press calling plays and Doug not being the guy that's just doing it is that there's this extra beat or two or three sometimes because of an extra layer of communication. What I would say, too many cooks in the kitchen. Again, I don't find this as a press Taylor sucks at calling plays problem. Like, I don't believe that. I don't think he's that bad as everybody says. I saw the video where all these plays are out there. But I think from the operation standpoint, it muddies it up. Too many voices in the ear of Trevor Lawrence, essentially. And with that becomes this delay in that 40-second clock, which is just a finite amount of time that you have to get things going. And as Trevor said, get up to the line, disguise, use the whole clock, snap the ball, and boom, execute your play. Well, if you take 2 or 3 seconds at the top of that and you slow that up, and then somebody in the huddle's like, hey, I didn't hear you, man. I didn't hear you. You can say it again. Or what? Or now you've got Dearness Johnson lined up wrong. Well, here you go. That's your problems. So I didn't see as much of that in year one under Doug as I remember in year one of this offense as I've seen it last year and now. And that's my problem with the play calling thing as much as anything else. So, and I'll go back to my initial question that kind of started this topic in February at the Combine. There's a logical sense of this that Doug should be doing the play calling. But then there's an operational sense of this from a communication standpoint that Doug or one person should be doing the play calling. See, you don't have that problem in Houston, let's just say, because DeMeco Ryans isn't going to go trump the play call that Slovic makes. He's a defensive guy.
Correct.
Right? But you do have that problem when Doug knows I'm the better play caller. Like that's like Doug's a better, like he knows what should be put. So on occasion, if you just get that, I mean, you can see it, right? Am I explaining this easy enough for everybody to understand? This is a game of telephone that's gone wrong.
Yeah, I think everybody that even a casual football fan knows what you're talking about because we've seen it at the pinnacle with Andy Reid. Like how many times do we have to hear Bieniemy deserves a job, Bieniemy deserves a head coaching job? That's fine, and you know, and then he got a coordinator spot in Washington, and it was what it was. But do you think? And I'm sure Bieniemy's a great guy. A lot of players speak very highly of him. But do you think Andy Reid was like, oh, okay, well, I mean, you're a great guy, you're nice, players respect you, we're really great friends. Here, go ahead and just take my playbook and go and make some calls. No. Because Andy Reid knows that he's the better play caller. It's his offense, and Patrick Mahomes will go through him. That's the chain of command. Regardless of what players think about it, regardless of how nice Eric Bieniemy is as a friend, it's Andy Reid's show. And in Philadelphia for a while, it was Doug Peterson's show because it's the same coaching tree. But for whatever reason, and once again, I don't know if it's a friendship. I don't know if it's trying to prop somebody up. I don't know if Doug just doesn't want the pressure. I don't know what it is, Brent. But at the end of the day, we're seeing a chain of command that is getting broken because there's, like you said, too many cooks in the kitchen. And I think Trevor is kind of the result of that. And the frustration coming from Trevor is a result of that.
Yeah. I think it's very simple. It's very simple. And in many respects, I try not to be too dramatic because I'll always go back to this, folks, and I'm not afraid to say it. I've been a huge Doug fan. I think in part because, relatively speaking, the offense that we've seen over the last couple of years, even though it's not as good as it should be in lately, is still better than what we saw for like my first 14 years in Jacksonville. So like there's probably some of that. But I think you can get to the point if you want to be, or are we getting to the point? And again, that's why I continue to use this word underbelly. This is going to undermine the whole operation at some point. Like if this continues to be a stubborn play by Doug, this will undermine and be the theme that kind of wrecks this. If it doesn't get fixed and go well, maybe they can. But if it doesn't, this is the one. This is the storyline. And in my opinion, you can almost go dramatic and be like, this is actually a little bit careless and reckless. careless and reckless to win football games, careless and reckless to operate the offense at the level you want, careless and reckless to get the best out of a guy that's got a lot of talent at the quarterback position, and you just paid him $275 million. And are we going to get to the point where it's careless and reckless all for the sake of stubbornness? I'm not going with the whole friend stuff. That's not it. I don't care about that part. I think that's a kind of a BS Philly to Jacksonville storyline.
How isn't it though, Brent? Like how else how can you not call that then? Because Doug Peterson, because he comes from the Andy Reid, like he understands how it works. And for whatever reason, he just switches it up and goes, all right, Press Taylor, you're calling the plays. Like if it's not friendship, if it's not trying to elevate a coworker, then what else is it?
I think for some reason, there's two things. First of all, I think he has confidence in him that he can call the right plays. He thinks along the same line. And he has confidence overall. Again, that doesn't change the bad game of telephone that could be going on communication wise. But I think he has the confidence that Press can do it. And also, I think for some reason, Doug believes that it makes him a better head coach on game day if he's not. And listen, Austin, I'm not telling you you're wrong and everybody else that wants to say this is wrong. I think there's a part of me that's almost like, if that is actually the reason, then fire him right now. Because I think that's ridiculous to think of. It's kind of like why I said yesterday, it's like, how do you not get up as an NFL player for a game? How are we talking about energy coming out of the gates yesterday in a home opener in week 2? Like, I have a hard time putting my head around something like that, to the same point of Doug is taking care of his buddy, that I just have such a hard time with that in this profession and where wins only matter and it's a gazillion dollar business, that we're going to dumb it down to that degree, that I have a hard time even acknowledging that it could be true.
I mean, and listen, you very well might be right. This is the NFL. This is supposed to be a performance-based business. Wins and losses are everything. And you might be right. But if you're asking me what I think is going on, I think Doug Peterson saw his replacement in Bieniemy come through Kansas City as an offensive coordinator, and it took Bieniemy forever to try to get a head coaching gig because teams were turned off by it because Andy Reid was calling the plays. I think Doug Peterson saw that and said, I don't want that for my friend Press Taylor, so I'm going to give Press Taylor the keys. I think the Bieniemy situation in Kansas City has a direct correlation to why Doug Peterson is not calling plays here in Jacksonville. I have no grounds to go off of. This is just my hunch. This is just my gut.
Yeah, and that's, by the way, I've been on that, like I've been right in line with you on that theory for a long time of how this started. I just don't know if it drags on as long when your job's on the line, when things aren't going right. I think the will to win, again, I might be wrong, guys, and gals and guys and everybody. I can't. The winning is what matters. Like, Doug's smart enough to know that. He knows the league. Winning is what matters. And I just think winning even matters more than, okay, now we got to worry about where you're going. He might have tried it under that premise, and I kind of put out that theory too, so I'm with you. But I don't know if you carry that premise for still, like right now. But I'm not telling you I'm wrong. I just can't get my mind there to believe it. And I'm going to give you one more thing on the play calling, Austin, that I keep going. I'm going to go back to this one where I haven't gone too much, but I want to remind folks what happened. And if you go back to the initial news conference, I don't remember a lot from the initial news conference when Doug got hired. It was like February 4th, 2022. And I remember this one thing. And somebody asked, and I can't remember who asked, but somebody asked, are you going to call plays? And Doug said, yes, I'm going to call plays. And Doug said, he elaborated on it. He was like, yeah, I'm going to call plays, but, like, listen, sometimes if I don't feel like I'm in a good rhythm, and it's not going well, I'm also not going to be afraid to hand off the plays. Which at the time, we didn't really blow this whole Press Taylor thing up, but that might have said a lot about I'm comfortable with Press Taylor calling plays. If I don't have a good day going, I'm going to give it to him. Right? It's like if you don't have a good running back day going, we'll give it to Tank Bigsby instead if ETN's not working. Well, I think forget that part of it. And that's why I come back this full circle for me this week, because I feel like that's what happened on Sunday in Jacksonville. And I'm not sure it did, but I think it did. That Press Taylor didn't have it working in the first half. For the first 35 minutes, they had 22 plays for 74 yards. Well, if Doug is a man of his word, and Doug is going to practice what he preaches, when he was the guy calling plays, he would have handed that off in the second half to Press Taylor. Well, let's hope that Doug said, give me the damn headset in the second half, because it ain't working for you. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you hope that's the case, and maybe you hope that's why Trevor Lawrence is a little more frustrated. It seemed like after this game in the press conference, those could all be true. I just think, though, that if it comes out now that, hey, I took over for Press Taylor, I'm calling the plays now, then how does it make Press Taylor look? Right? And once again, like, it's supposed to be about wins and losses, Brent, and that's it. It's a performance-based business. But I just get the feeling where it's like Doug knows where, okay, well, if I take the play call away from Press Taylor, that's going to hurt his opportunity to get a head coaching job one day. And it's ridiculous. It's asinine that I'm even like thinking this way. But that's all I can think of at this point. Like that's where I'm at. When you go back to the combine or whatever, when we asked who's calling the plays, and it was, oh, we'll see. And then when we see how this whole thing has kind of played out so far, that's all I can think about. And if you're willing, and once again, I'm not saying this is the correct narrative here. This is what I think. If you're willing to put a friendship over winning football games, I'm not sure if this sport's for you anymore. Honestly, if that's what we're talking about. I mean, and I think anybody would agree with me here. And I wonder at what point does Shad Khan interfere and be like, okay, this obviously isn't working, Doug. And you get the sense that Shad Khan has turned up the heat a little bit, as he should. How much has he invested this season? So yeah, by all means, turn up the heat. You're the owner. But I wonder at what point does it become a Shad Khan issue too, as well as like, Doug, what are we doing here?
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe it's already there. Behind closed doors. We know this, and that's like kind of to kind of put this all in like full context where we started this segment and where Austin's going with this today. Again, we're not usually still this hot after a Sunday game, but there's an underbelly of stuff happening here in Jacksonville, and it feels like it. And Austin, if you're just jumping in, Austin said, hey, the comment from Trevor Lawrence that says we've got to all do better, including the coaches, is a pretty rare comment from any player to say. There's that line that usually doesn't get crossed. And while it may have just rolled off like, hey, everybody, from the janitor to the coaches, it actually was pretty loud in Austin's ears. And so what is going on behind closed doors? Where is the toxicity level of this football team now that they have disappointed in a year where there were high expectations? As I say, great expectations bring great disappointment. And I didn't come up with that, by the way, but it's a great quote because it's real, right? I mean, and especially in sports. I mean, this is stunning to be 0-2 and look the way it does. It wouldn't be as stunning to me to be 0-2 and lose 34-31. Then you could say the defense, they kind of get used to Nielsen. Nielsen ain't any good. That was a bad hire. No. Now you probably have Mike Caldwell's staff saying, looks like they got rid of the wrong people in Jacksonville this year. Because they kept the offensive line coach. Press Taylor's still calling plays. They still can't get this damn offense to work. And by the way, that's probably fair game right now for somebody to say, because overall, since the start of last year, since this offense got cooking late 22, the offense has been underperforming from a consistency level. They've had good moments, but they haven't had enough of them at a consistent level. We don't know what we're going to get every week. And we've got 17 points and a goose egg in the second half against a pretty average defense of the Miami Dolphins, I think. And then you have a 3-point output and 74 yards 35 minutes into the game against the Cleveland Browns on your home turf. And you think you're good on offense? Like you think you're good. That ain't good. So there's a lot going on here, man. And then on top of it, you got guys walking in a building and you know how this works. When the heat gets turned up and that great expectations bring great disappointment, That's when this starts happening. The finger pointing starts happening. And it's like, well, look at this crap offensive line. And, well, you should be calling plays, Doug. And, I mean, I'm not telling you that is happening yet, but this is how it works. We've been around this long enough to know. Austin's actually been in the buildings to know this is how it works, because these are million-dollar jobs with egos and protection about your future, really, about where you end up or your legacy or all of those things. So these are just human nature things that invade a billion-dollar business that ends up happening inside these buildings. And I'm not telling you it's there yet, but I got to believe, Austin, we're on the verge of some of that, don't you think?
Yeah. I mean, to me, and I don't like saying it, but it feels like depending how this Bills game could go, it could be a powder keg that's ready to blow up, really. And it's sad we're talking about. We're still in week 2, Brett. It's such a long season. And listen, do you think they're panicking right now in Cincinnati? I don't think so. Like I get it. 0-2 is kind of the prerequisite, but like they always kind of turn things around. Like are they panicking in Dallas? Like I don't think so after that Saints game. Like there's some teams like, okay, yeah, Carolina, yeah, okay, you bench your starting quarterback. Like there's panic there. There's frustration, but I'm not even trying to put the same area code as the Jacksonville Jaguars and Carolina Panthers. They're two different teams. They're two different talent levels, two different rosters. And it's almost to the point where it's like, well, I hope like we don't go down the road of, man, we have to, tear it all down again, because that's the way that it seems like it's going right now. And I'm not trying to over embellish. We're not trying to over exaggerate, but it's not off to a great start. Let's just say it like that. And you're frustrated. And this is, let's be honest, Brent, for as long as we've been doing the show together, I don't remember you being frustrated this early in the season. There's been bad years that we've covered this team. But this may be the most frustrated that we've been. And there's been, like I said, a lot of losing seasons. But this could be the most frustrated thing because they're so talented. At least on paper they are. Or at least we were told that they were talented. And I think they are talented. It's just not you're not getting the best version of the Jaguars right now.
Yeah, and I think and here's the deal. I don't think you're wrong. I don't know my level of frustration versus other years. I just would say I think there's a couple of reasons why my frustration level is. First of all, I think there are like the angry Twitter Sunday folks, like those people, like, and that's fine, by the way. It's okay. I'm not calling you out. I'm just saying they're not always right in the moment. Like we're not always right in the moment. I think there's some depth to everything, and I like to look at it at the other side. But I also been around this long enough to know that there are things that do transpire. And I'll tell you this, like people, there's some stuff out there already, like in the last couple of days that the building's this or that or whatever. And again, I try to tell you that already exists. The wins and losses just kind of move that. But I'll also tell you this. I hear a lot of stuff coming out of that building. And I told somebody this last night. Honestly, everybody gets in save your ass mode so quick when these things happen that I don't trust a lot of stuff out of the building. I've heard stuff 6 months ago that changed 3 months later. Like, and some people have their own feelings about certain people. So people have agendas. And that's not just like the Doug people or the Trent Baalke people or what. Everybody seems to have an agenda sometimes. And by the way, they change their agenda and they just hop on the next train and they're not really held accountable for their original agenda. So I think it's almost like politics today in a sense, what happens inside an NFL building where like if you're like me that doesn't really pay attention to like either side and watch all the political stuff, I have no idea what the hell to believe in politics. Like I really don't. So because I don't know where the truth lies. So NFL buildings can sometimes work that way in a sense because there's so much of this like stuff when stuff starts happening. See, I disagree with you. I actually think in Cincinnati there's probably some of this. I think Jamar Chase has created some of this and that whole situation. I think in Dallas there's always that because it's Dallas, quite frankly, because of McCarthy and Jerry Jones and everything else. I don't think Jacksonville's alone here. Now, I think in Baltimore there's probably not as much hysteria because they feel like they're a little bit aligned or more in line to me. So I think, but the one thing I would say that bothers me more right now And it's the it's when you don't do things that are logical. Like, it's a hard game. I get it. There's a lot of uncontrollables. I don't pretend to know Doug Peterson's job and Press Taylor's job as much as I think the rest of us on the outside sometimes do. But when you complicate it more than you should, and I believe Doug has done that with the play calling thing. And then on top of that, when you're taking a quarterback that's 24 years old and we know he's talented and we know he should be the franchise quarterback, and you're setting him up at times for failure, and I'm not taking all blame from him. But I'll just go back to this, Austin. These last 2 weeks, I don't know whether I should be hard on Trevor or not. I should defend Trevor. I think it's a hard line to know because Bulky trusting this offensive line, Rauscher coaching this offensive line, Doug and Press play calling stuff, the game of communication to get the play call in, and then just guys messing up around him. From ETN to Kirk to Dearness Johnson, I really don't know where to land on the Trevor stuff at the moment 2 weeks into the season. So some of the stuff that's going on right now in Jacksonville is, okay, it's disappointing you lose and you don't execute, you don't play the game the way you should. But some of it also defies logic of how we got here 2 weeks into the season and what we're talking about.
No, absolutely. It defies logic, Brent, but I spoke on this yesterday a little bit, and I just want to reiterate, this season was supposed to be a lot of things. I'm saying like the season's over. It's not even close to being over. You still have 15 games to play. So, like, a lot of things can happen. I would love to be here in December laughing about this, just saying, like, hey, remember when we were panicking for no reason? Like, that's what I would love to do. Now, all indications so far have shown that's not going to happen, but that's what I would love for it to happen, obviously. But this was supposed to be playoffs, whatever. But to me, this was going to be the year where it was like the Trevor Lawrence coming out party. I said this many times. There wasn't going to be any excuses anymore, right? You have your weapons, okay? There's no, and I get it. Like, when you first got to the Jaguars, yeah, maybe, we had Marvin Jones Jr., okay, like, maybe you didn't have the best receivers, maybe you didn't have the best weapons to be successful. Okay, we'll take that away. Now you have the best weapons, right? Brian Thomas Jr. is already coming on as a rookie. Christian Kirk, if he can stay healthy, we've seen good from him. Evan Ingram last year, one of the best tight ends in the NFL. Travis Etienne, we know what he can do. Okay, so that was good. We're great there. Hopefully you have a defense, and I think we both agreed, like, the defense should be able to play complementary football to get you the ball back to be successful. Okay, well, so far so good. Defense holding, time possession could be a little bit of a factor, but for the most part, they're keeping you in the football game. And then I was like, okay, well, your offensive line, you said you liked that because you didn't really make any changes besides the center, right? And even then, Doug Peterson's coming out and saying, yeah, we think, like, we like our center. Well, then a couple of days later, you get much more, but you got the sense that, okay, the offensive line's going to be okay. So there's going to be no excuses for Trevor Lawrence not to shine, to not be the generational guy. And we're sitting here week 2, and we don't even have a good test of, well, how good is Trevor Lawrence? I don't know. The offensive line's not doing so well. I don't know. They can't get the plays at a certain time. I don't know. The goal line or the red zone offense is more of the same. Like, Brent, I seriously don't know. And once again, this is echoing what I said yesterday, but this has been the most frustrating thing because we paid a guy a lot of money because I think we all know. But then he goes out there, we watch him, and it's like, well, I don't know because he can't get a fair shake. And that's where we are. And by the way, this isn't a first-year thing, okay? This isn't a second-year thing. He's been here for a while now, and we're still having these conversations. What are we doing?
Yeah. I think that's why we're here right now. I mean, they've got to figure this out. They've got to figure out who they are, and that's why I say it's deeper. It's like they've got to. They're in a little bit of an identity crisis still, and they shouldn't be. We should know what they are. And I do want to talk about that a little bit because I want to ask you this. Like, I almost think, in a weird way, I wouldn't do this to the team. But I'm trying to think from Doug's standpoint, because I've asked you guys this already this week. I asked Doug it Sunday, and I asked Trevor it Sunday. It's like, what do you do to jumpstart it, right? And he talked a little bit about it yesterday, too. He kind of brought it up. But, like, you can't show panic because you built too much, and you got to show confidence in players. That's why people don't like Doug saying, hey, yeah, we like our offensive line. What the hell else is he supposed to say? Like, he can't not say it, okay? Like, come on. I mean, you can't just sit there and say our offensive line sucks. Although, I mean, here you go. John Shipley's tweet today, as Ty just texted me, I'd already seen it, but the Jaguars ranked number 28th in rushing yards before contact per carry at just .90. They ranked number 1 in yards after contact per carry, 4.52. The running backs are doing all the work, in essence, per next-gen stats, according to John Shipley's tweets. So, like, yeah, the offensive line isn't good enough. Like, that's a bottom line thing. Mitch Morse is grading out better than maybe some people think. Sheriff is not. Cam Robinson is not. Anton Harrison has really not been good the first 2 weeks. And Ezra Cleveland, I mean, I think it's here nor there, but he missed a huge block the other day. So, I mean, that's just a fact. But Doug ain't going to say it. I mean, he can't say it.
Yeah.
He's already probably called out players more than he usually will. I mean, he essentially said yesterday in his news conference that, hey, if we don't fumble the ball and we line up correctly, we might be 2-0. Like, he essentially just put it, boom, on those two plays, on those two players. And that's kind of going beyond for Doug Austen. Like, he doesn't usually do anything when it comes to players. That's why he went after, or it sounded like he went after Nielsen more than like Cisco last Monday, right?
But even going up to Nielsen still, obviously rubbed people the wrong way, I think. And I don't know if this is just a trend. I don't know, man. But, like, I think back to last year and how it ended, and Caldwell was meant to be the scapegoat. And I get it. Like, I think a lot of the blame should fall on him because, you couldn't stop the run. It really came down to the defense just getting manhandled, and you had to make a change. But then you get like all the smoke after the season, like, yeah, Caldwell was this, and you get the sense that, okay, Doug Peterson was happy with Caldwell. Okay, great. And then you fast forward, you bring in Ryan Nielsen, a lot of intrigue, a lot of hype, and against Miami, was it perfect? Well, probably not, but for, I think, a debut defense against one of the best offenses at the time in the NFL, 20 points, I think that's a pretty damn good job.
Mm-hmm.
And we see Doug Peterson point the finger at Nielsen and say, you got to coach it up better. So at what point, and maybe this is happening behind closed doors, but I think it speaks volumes when you're in front of the cameras, when you're in front of the media, and you want to keep pointing the fingers at other people. At what point do you have to take accountability for yourself and say, okay, well, I'm the head coach. I'm supposed to be in charge of the quarterback's development. I'm supposed to be in charge of this offense. And guess what? It's not looking good. At what point does Doug just go, yeah, this has to be better on me? And then, and I get, like, well, we've heard, take a look at yourself in the mirror, all this stuff. But I haven't really seen any fire. Like, I haven't really seen any, like, yeah, guys, this is unacceptable. This is what I'm supposed to be doing, and I'm not doing it. I haven't heard any of that. But I have seen finger pointing, but I haven't seen a lot of accountability.
Yeah, I don't know what the play is. I think his let me ask you this real quick. Do players look at the news conferences?
No, I mean, truth be told, man, I never watched one news conference from when I played.
You didn't? Okay.
But I mean, no, but I will say, like, and the landscape has changed now a little bit, Brent, but I do feel like where if the big comment, like, did come, like, I mean, for instance, and I told this story before, when we played the Houston Texans my rookie year, because they used to call me, like, the bringer of pain or whatever. So that was Vito, Vito trying to stir up stuff. But there was one point where they said, it was Austin Lane's second start or something like that. What'd you think of it against the Houston Texans offense? And Jack Del Rio goes, well, I'll tell you what, they call him the bringer of pain, but he caused me a lot of pain today. Like, that was in the press conference. And I didn't watch it live, obviously. I don't know if it was even on Twitter back then, but, like, I heard it, like, the next day. Like, I saw the video of it. It was brought to my attention, let's just say. So I definitely knew it was out there in the airways, and I knew how, Del Rio felt about me that game. So, like, that kind of I don't want to say it upset me, but I was disappointed. I mean, I didn't play my best game, number one. I'm still trying to learn my craft and everything, but like to have that vote of confidence didn't do anything for me. So my point though, Brent, is like if something outlandish or something, gets said, players are going to know about it. So to answer your question, I think where you're going with this is, did players know about Doug Peterson talking about Ryan Nielsen? And my answer is absolutely yes. I think they did.
Yeah, I think so too. And here's the way I think it works. And I learned this a little bit with a lot of the Blake Bortles stuff too. Like Blake didn't really pay attention to a lot of it, but I think back in the day, he kind of, I was like, how's it going? I talked to him a little bit in the locker room, and he'd be like, yeah, it's this stuff's like a lot harder on my family. It's like I got to tell my mom or whatever to get off Twitter, just get off. But the family can't, right? So the family sees it. And then when he says, like, the family sends it to you because they're pissed off, right? So that's kind of how it works, which makes some sense to me, right? I mean, again, I think we forget these guys are like normal people too, like humans, like us. Like that's the way things operate, and they don't like to get called out. And so some people interpret it differently. Some people probably wouldn't mind held accountable, especially in your business where you usually are in front of a big room, and other people don't like it. But what I was a little bit more interested in is how much the body language and the attitude of Doug on last Monday and then Sunday night would have filtered down to them. The kind of angry Doug from Monday and then the almost pouty Doug, if you will, from Sunday night in those two news conferences. And I don't know what that feeds down to, because what was very interesting to me is yesterday, if you watch the Zoom call with Doug, he was very more positive and upbeat. And he was actually saying, he's like, listen, I know there's a lot negative going on, but there's a lot of good stuff going on too. And I'm going to make sure we point that out to the guys. And it's like, we're not that as far away as 0-2 feels. And I get that, by the way. I have respect for that stuff. Like if you're in charge of a group of 53 guys and trying to get the best out of them, you can't act like we're acting here on the show or social media is acting. Now, at times, you do have to jostle it up and shake it up, but you can't be like that. And that's why I was stunned the way Doug looked after 1 week against the Miami Dolphins. And I guess a little less stunned at his shell-shocked nature on Sunday night, because I think we all kind of were, that they were 0-2 now to start the season with all these expectations. So, but I do think it was very intentional what Doug did yesterday, Austen, and his body language and his attitude and all those things in that news conference on Monday.
No, I mean, and that's what it has to be, right? Because now you're trying to salvage any kind of momentum that you have left, and it's not a lot, right? And when I say that momentum, I mean from training camp, right? Like the intrigue, the motivation to go to the playoffs. Like you're still trying to carry that message. It's just now you have to go maybe a little different way of getting there. And again, it's one thing if this product on the field looks like, okay, man, they're getting in track meets, right? It's 30, whatever the case may be. These games are in their 30s. The defense is doing their thing. Offense is looking fine, but we just can't finish at the end. That would be one thing. But when you are essentially the exact opposite of what your team identity is supposed to be,
yeah,
that's an issue. And that's where they're at right now. Like if you would have told me in training camp that Austen, the first two games of the Jaguars season, the identity is going to be, well, their defense is going to play pretty well and keep them in the game, but their offense can't score any points, I'd have been like, well, what does that look like? Because I couldn't even fathom that in training camp. But that's where we are now. And yeah, once again, it's obviously it's going to fall on Doug Peterson. And I think we can talk about, I mean, I'm sure we're probably pushing way past the break here, but and then we got to kind of have
that was about 40 minutes ago.
Yeah. But then I think the conversation, the narrative as well, Brent, is, is this roster competitive? And when I say competitive, I mean the offensive line. And how much of that falls on Trent Baalke?